it's been since June of 2020 that Dave first did a presentation with the Katalyst community, and we're grateful to have him back with us. Hard to believe how much life has changed, or in perception it has changed. So I recall back in June of last year, we were talking about this idea of people returning to office in the beginning of July, and it was a certain thing, and I think that we were still trying to figure out, can people be successful working remotely, and what does this mean, and also how do we get our students back into the school systems. So a year later, with all sorts of hindsight, everyone has been successful working remotely. It's been challenging in some regards, and kind of a time saver in other regards. So it's kind of a fitting topic that we're going to be covering today. And in our world of helping organizations attract people to hire full time, and also to bring people in a consulting capacity, one of the big questions that is being contemplated is, what's the value of bringing people back into the office, and what's lost when we're starting to ask them to return, and is it necessary? And so I think that there's a lot yet to be answered in that regard. But one thing's for sure, people are not keen on the idea of necessarily returning to office because of this concept of time that's lost commuting. And we found other ways in our lives to fill time. So Dave, without further ado, I appreciate you spending time talking to us about this concept of reinventing our relationship with time, and really excited to get into this with you. So thanks very much for sharing today.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Thanks so much for having me. Really want to acknowledge you. Thanks for, I don't know, we go back officially, I believe, almost 40 years, if not even longer. So 4 decades. Thanks for being a stand-up guy for all those years. Really, when it comes down to it, those are my memories of you being a stand-up guy. So thanks, Kevin Kay, for another opportunity. I'm glad that there are, Andrea, thank you so much for being here. I think you're an amazing rock star and person who is important to me. Than Grayson, one of the kindest souls I have ever met in my entire life. I remember I was sharing with Kevin, he said that you registered, and my only memories of you are you just being a really nice guy at school and at church and everywhere else. So thanks a ton for being here, man. It's great to see you. Julie, thank you. And thank you for the work that you put into this. And Jerry, thanks for being here. So awesome. This can be a little intimate, so we can do some live in person without a net coaching. I'm going to talk about what all that stuff is, but really time is just sort of the container that we're going to give everyone an opportunity to explore their existence through the lens of, I guess I'll just sort of start to move through this. Why is it not clicking? Technical difficulties. You never know how things are going to go when you move out into the unknown. So the name of the presentation obviously is Mastering Time, Reinventing Your Relationship to One of Life's Most Persistent Mysteries. So time is one of those things that all human beings are challenged by at one time or another. It's very often you'll see time, you'll see romances, you'll see finances. Those are like 3 of the most fundamental challenges that human beings face. Are challenges with time, challenges in relationships, not necessarily romantic, but challenges with other human beings, and then challenges with finances. So we're going to just kind of take a real look at time here, and you're going to kind of see an interconnectedness between all of those things. As Kevin said, feel free to ask whatever questions arise whenever you'd like. And there are a couple questions that I've kind of that I lob out from time to time. So participate, because this is cool. The last time I think there were like 20 people, and this time there's 5 or 6 of us, or 7 of us. Looks like we just got somebody new. So we might be able to dive into some stuff a little bit deeper. So I'll just introduce myself officially. So my name is Dave Kehnast of Kehnast Coaching. So who am I? First and foremost, I'm a surfer. I live in Southern California. I started surfing on the Great Lakes actually about 11, 12 years ago, and I moved out to California 5 years ago. Love it more than anything else in the universe. It's it's the time I value to spend more than any other time is for me to be in the ocean, which then leads me to coaching. So I've been coaching people for 10 years now. So it's hard to explain what life coaching is. Ultimately, it's about supporting people in becoming the greatest versions of themselves that they can possibly be. So it's often a very deep transformational process. My process of becoming a coach started with somebody asking me years ago, hey, how do you want your life to look? And I said, I want to live in California. I want to surf every day, which then led to the next question, what's in the way of that? Well, like time and money and job and all this other stuff. And then somebody asked me, well, what if we move that out of the way and we just got you present to possibility? And what if the story you're making up about this being impossible was actually possible? And here I sit, surfing every single day. So again, that's what I value. So how you value to spend the time in your existence is totally up to you, right? Or how you choose to spend time in your existence is up to you. So we're going to kind of cover that stuff. I'm a Kundalini yogi. I practice Kundalini yoga every day. I'm a writer. I got about 60 chapters of 80 edited and an addiction memoir I'm finishing up. I love music. I love the ocean. I got a podcast called the Magic Pisces Podcast. Podcasting is cool because you just get to have your channel and say your stuff and people can take it or leave it. I'm one of the founders of Transformation Trio. So Transformation Trio is a collaboration with myself and Linnell Harris. Linnell's from Chicago. Send a prayer out to him if you pray. His mother just died about 7 or 8 days ago. So he's mourning. And then my other friend, Carlos Jones. We're committed to excellence in the field of personal transformation. So all three of us have combined experience of probably 40 years, maybe more, in working with human beings and the challenges they face. So stay tuned, though. There's a link Kevin will send you to an ebook that we released recently. So grab a pen, stay present. I don't think I need to say these things. Turn off your phone if you got a phone or something that dings. One of the ways to honor time is to eliminate distractions. I'm going to cover all this again, and we'll just get started. So the intention is to create awareness around the nature of time and that the challenge human beings face with time. And then want you to walk away with like 5 or 6 things you can do today. And then I've got a worksheet I can send you guys out afterwards as well. But we want to have this thing be applicable. Now, in order to transform your relationship with time, it's a challenge. So mastery requires practice. So a lot of people are set in their ways around time. And shifting your relationship to something like this, just like money, it requires practice. I don't think I need to cover this too much. I'm going to start with just some considerations around time. So considerations are just that, considerations. They're not the ultimate truth. We call them considerations because they're just some things for you to ponder. So these are not necessarily facts. When I invite people to consider something, it tends to remove the energy of argumentativeness from the equation, and it allows them to just sort of see things through a different lens. So often when I'm working with somebody, I'll say, well, you might just want to consider this. So these, again, are just considerations, right? So I love this. This is not the actual dictionary definition of time, but I love this definition of time being one that time is defined as every moment that ever has been, is, or ever will be. And then to go into Warren Buffett, right? He says that time is the only thing that you can't purchase. So, Bezos just launched himself into space in this multi-billion-dollar rocket that he had built for himself. And he can afford to do that and fly to the planet that he's probably purchased, that is the other life-sustaining planet, right? And in the Milky Way galaxy. But he can't buy 1 minute. And that is a fascinating, and it can also be a terrifying fact. That actually is a fact to ponder, right? It's the only thing that you can't buy, right? And then I don't want to get too far out there, but Einstein on time, this is getting into the theory of relativity and quantum physics and stuff, but he says when you sit with a nice girl for 2 hours, it seems like 2 minutes. But when you sit on a hot stove for 2 minutes, it seems like 2 hours, and that's relativity. So, I have had people that I've worked with, and they discover ways to what almost seems like bend time or morph time. And eternity, ponder this. Eternity is not time that goes on forever. It's actually the absence of time altogether. It's where time ceases to exist, right? But like I said, we're not going to get too esoteric. Did you have a question, Jerry, or something you wanted to put in there? Cool. So, time management. I didn't mean for it to animate this way, but whatever. You only find things out when you're on stage. So, time management, where we attempt to control every moment, it's actually a fallacy. You cannot control time. But what you can control, and this is one of the big takeaways here, is that you can control your focus and energy, or your attention and your intention, right? So an example I'll use to illustrate that, if you're in the NBA finals and it's the final game of the championship and you're down 10 points and there's 2 minutes left, you can't add another minute on. There's nothing you can do. You can't change 2 minutes into 7 minutes. But what you can control is the way that you direct your energy and focus for those 2 remaining minutes, so that you get to the ball into the hoop the number of times that are required to win the game. You can also control your focus and attention leading up to the event. So you can control the extent and the amount to which you practice, but you can't control time itself. So are there any questions about that? Cool. So what do you think that means? Like what a better question would be, what do you guys gather from that? Does anybody have anything they'd like to put in?
I was going to say, Dave, that it's interesting because as we approach things that we may be uncomfortable doing or nervous about doing, it seems like time moves even more quickly. And this thing that we can't control becomes this thing that we're really fighting against when we're approaching things we don't want to be doing. So it's interesting to think about, how do you then not worry about the fact that the time is passing, but prepare yourself to be prepared for whatever that uncomfortable thing is well in advance of experiencing the uncomfort.
Tell me a little bit more.
So like today, for example, and putting together the presentation, and 2 months ago, it seems like we were talking about this concept of getting a webinar going. And then with each passing day, it's like, okay, it's another day closer, another day closer. But then it becomes this, it's happening in an hour, it's happening in 30 minutes, it's happening now. And how do we train ourselves not to wait until the evening before to do something, but do it well in advance, so that that time approaching doesn't seem to be cutting in half, or having a half life.
No, exactly. And I appreciate you putting that in, because what I'm going to talk about scheduling here a little bit, but the way that I prepared for this was to set out 30-minute chunks, 30-minute increments. And what I would do is just say, I'm going to do nothing, but I'm going to focus my energy and my attention and my intention and my attention on creating a good experience for people, and do the absolute best that I could for those 30 minutes. So I went in 30-minute chunks. And so there was almost like a freedom in that, because when the timer went off, I concluded that would be sufficient until the next day, when I would give myself 30 more minutes. So there's just all these little time hacks that you can do, right? And then the challenge for me is always eliminating distractions, right? So consider further that there's plenty of time. So people always think there's not enough time, there's not enough time, there's not enough time, there's not enough time. There's actually plenty of time, and we're actually ingenious at wasting time and not using time effectively, which is sort of like a more positive, I guess, way of relating to wasting time, is not using it effectively. And one of the challenges, wasting time comes down to essentially not honoring the opportunity that exists in the moment. It's funny. You never know how things are going to go until you get on stage, because like the pictures are blocking out the writing. It's so funny. It's like sometimes you just can't be prepared enough. It's the beauty of performance. So again, I don't want to get too out there, right? But consider that the present moment has all of the wisdom encapsulated within it to support you in living the life that you want, and that the trick is being present enough to pay attention to what the moment is dictating. Does that make sense to you guys? What do you think I mean by that?
I think, Dave, you're talking about what is the universe, or however you want to define it, telling me in the moment, and I should be in tune to that, listening to that, as opposed to tonight I've got this, or tomorrow I got another thing, and try to derive as much benefit out of the where you are right now, because I'm sure you'll get into this eventually. We do run out of time, and then what happens, though, or at least in this on the earth, let's put it that way. So
Exactly. On the earth, right? And so the more, not to take this in too spiritual of a direction, but you're dead on. The universe, God, he, she, it, whatever you choose to relate to something greater than yourself, if you choose to relate to something greater than yourself, is directing us. And if we are able to be present enough in said given moment, we will be directed towards what the next moment is. Right? I think I put a joke in here, yeah. And then there's this, I think I got this from The Onion. There's woman's attempt to live in the moment has been disrupted by the arrival of other moments. So you can go out and read like Eckhart Tolle, and Eckhart Tolle says, the power of now. Let's just be here in the moment. And you read that book and you're like, yes, all we have is now. But then there's a circumstance or a crash or an accident or something that you don't want to address. And so it's like, what's the rub here, right? Because the moment always is, there are other moments that arise. And so it can be, living in the moment can be very challenging, but can be incredibly satisfying, which is why I always bring up the example of being a surfer, because those moments are moments I cherish more than anything. And it's in those moments that I get inspirations, which are downloads from spirit, from spirit, that will be directing me for what I need to do when I get out of the ocean, if that makes sense. It all comes to that presence, that being present with essentially all of creation. So how do you honor yourself in the moment? Right? A potential relationship to time, right, is that time is access to power, right? So that if you manage your energy and focus and you have more, manage your energy and focus and you have more power in every moment, right? And so satisfaction and fulfillment live in the present. So being present allows for those and many more benefits, and this happens now in every moment. You guys wrap your head around that? Andrea, what are you hearing that?
I knew you were going to pick on me. So time is access to power. If you manage your time, you have more power in whatever it is you're putting your focus towards, right? So I'm distracted by my phone all the time. That's where my time suck is. And the things that I want to accomplish, if I can push that phone out, right, and have my focus, my energy, my attention, my intention, the way you put it, then my time is more powerful, better used. So I just kind of dance around that a little.
Oh, that's exactly right. So it's like you can't manage the 1 minute. I mean, this leads into the next slide. So if you had 1 minute and your job was to spend that minute in the most effective way possible, how would you spend that minute? You have 1 minute.
1 minute. You're asking me specifically or everybody?
Well, no, how about you specifically?
1 minute?
1 minute.
Oh boy. Not on my phone.
No, go on.
Yeah, probably out in nature, or doing something that's creative.
Cool. Like I have a colleague who's an incredibly successful entrepreneur. And he's always saying things like, well, I freed up 5 minutes, so I decided to. And then he's got this like fill in the blank thing that he decided to do for 5 minutes that completely forwarded his entire existence, right? And it's so funny because I watch how this person relates to everything, and there's an honoring of the moment and the honoring of the 5 minutes that has presented itself to him, that when he takes advantage of it, he manages to completely and totally further his entire existence. And that's what makes him extraordinary and not ordinary. And so there's these little opportunities that we have to take advantage of our existence versus distract ourselves. And right now we live I'm going to get into distractions here in a little bit, but yeah, we live in an infinitely distractible universe currently, right? And this begs the question, if this was your last day on earth, how would you spend it? Not to get all dark or anything, but these are sort of like, these questions don't need to be existential. So if you had one day, how would you spend that day? And then it gets into, you know, like what I do for a living would be like, well, what's in the way of you creating more days like that? I don't have enough time, or I don't have enough money, which then turns into another conversation, right? But all of us have the ability within us to generate and create days that we would choose to spend exactly how we'd like them to. You guys following this? Anybody have anything they want to put in? Any questions, anything? Cool. So the easiest way to limit the future is to not be responsible for what's going on right now in the present. So it comes back to that where is the moment directing you, right? What is universe telling you to do, and are you a clear enough channel to be able to hear what universe is saying? And then that leads us into I don't like to use the word meant, but that leads us in futures that we're much more meant to live into versus futures by default. Because what happens is people don't pay attention to what's going on in the present because they're so focused on the future, and then the future happens to them, and then they look back and life just happened, right? And so the way to create an empowered future is to be very clear and present in the present, right? So this is distractions, right? So the thing that gets in the way of the present moment, right, is distractions. So we're ingenious at distracting ourselves from the present moment. And so we call these weapons of mass distraction. And there are different types of distractions. So Facebook, your phone, Netflix, YouTube. You go on YouTube now and just watch the best parts of your favorite series now. You don't even have to like sit through the parts you don't like. You can just go on YouTube and watch the best parts of The Wire and skip all the boring parts. Like, we live in this infinitely distractible universe. And your brain actually becomes physiologically wired, right, to be distracted. And distractions become an addiction. So one of the hacks I talk about, I've been taking my phone and throwing it in the trunk of my car and listening to CDs while I drive. I ordered a bunch of CDs and I've been listening to CDs, and they sound way better than the digital recordings. There's just something better about them. But I'm catching myself reaching for my phone as I'm driving, and what's that all about, right? So the neural pathways in my brain have been formed in such a way that I'm reaching for something that I have absolutely no need for. And I'm not the only one. And, you know, if you want to do some research, like there's a guy, Joe Dispenza. He does all sorts of really cool he breaks down the physiology of the brain and the neural pathways of the brain into very understandable layman's terms. He does very cool, profound, powerful work that's digestible for the masses. So he's the one who kind of turned me onto this. It's called neuroplasticity, right? So when we're distracting ourselves, we're becoming addicted to our distractions. And so consider that simply discovering ways to live a distraction-free life gives you an advantage over like 90% of the workforce. Just discovering ways to be distracted, to not be distracted. And there's a concept called deep work. There's actually a book called Deep Work, and deep work is in demand. So deep work is work that requires very deep focus and concentration, and most people are more than capable of it, right? So I mentioned that I'm finishing up a book. It requires deep work, and it's just challenging because I'm writing this book on my computer, and you forget to set everything. You forget to turn off all the alerts and the alerts on your phone, and all of a sudden you're distracted, right? But it's in discovering ways to eliminate those distractions and dive into that deep work that we're able to get places that most people don't think they can, even though they're more than capable. Does that all make sense? So that's there are internal and external distractions. So the external distractions are the Facebook, the Netflix, the whatever, right? The phone while we're driving. I already mentioned this. Manage distraction, you've got an invention in this day and age. But the internal distractions, I'm going to come back to that. Internal distractions are our crazy thoughts that come up when we choose to be present. And there's a direct relationship between internal distractions and the integrity in which you live your life, or the integrity with which you live your life, right? So I'm going to illustrate that more deeply. So if you minimize your external distractions or eliminate your external distractions, and you choose to sit and be still for 5 minutes, and that's when your internal distractions are going to pop up. So if you have situations in your life that are out of integrity, like perhaps there's an addiction that you're not addressing, perhaps there's something in your relationship you're not addressing, perhaps there's something that you need to say to your boss that you're not saying, perhaps there's a bill that you're avoiding paying, perhaps there is credit card debt. Those are power leaks in your life. Those are integrity outs in your life, and there's nothing wrong with them. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person because you've got that credit card debt. It doesn't mean that. It just means that you're leaking power because of that credit card debt. Does that make sense? So if you eliminate your external distractions and then you get present and you decide to meditate or be still, that's when the integrity stuff can pop up. I got to handle this. I got to clean my car. I got to clean my room. I got to do this. I got to handle some stuff with the kids, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the propensity from that place is then to reintroduce external distractions so as to distract you from the present moment. Because if you choose to be present and decide to lean through the resistance regarding the bill or the thing that needs to be said in the relationship or the whatever, right? That's leading you in the direction of a more empowered future. Does that all make sense? So that's, and meditation is an incredibly effective way to remedy this. Just discovering ways to just be still. And people often think that, like, if you're going to start meditating, you need to do it for, go sit in a cave or something and dedicate your life to meditation or meditate for hours a day. 1 to 3 minutes of meditation per day can have a profound effect in your life. And all you got to do is like Google meditation techniques. Essentially, all you're doing is sitting there. That's it. It's mastering the art of doing nothing is really ultimately is a lot of what meditation is about. And it's a very effective way to start discovering. It's a very effective way to discover how to be present. If that makes sense. There's this guy, Gary John Bishop. He wrote 2 amazing books. One is called Stop Doing That Shit, and the other one is called On Yourself. My 2 favorite personal development books. And this guy, Gary John Bishop, says that the secret to his success, the only thing that he does is what comes up in meditation. So he meditates in the morning and he gets these ideas of things that there are to do, and then he just does them. That's it. That's his entire secret to success. He's one of the most successful coaches in the world, Gary John Bishop. So check out his books. And the thing that he really emphasizes in those works is that there's absolutely nothing about him that's special. He's just a person that chooses to stay present and do the next thing, the next directed thing, the next indicated thing, right? So all that you want comes about as the result of discovering how to be present in the moment and then using time effectively to move you in the direction of where you would like to go. Is all that clear? Does anybody have any questions?
I was going to say, Dave, it's interesting that you bring this up, Gary John Bishop's approach, because I was just helping this individual that we placed as a VP of finance make a transition into a new career opportunity. And one of the things that she referenced when we were talking is that she wakes up every morning at 3 a.m. to meditate. And it's just become one of her tried and true daily practices. And she goes back to bed after she meditates, but this is something she uses to help guide her in what she's doing and family life and professionally. So it's really intriguing to hear that there's this practice that's focused on meditating, regardless of what time, but that Gary John Bishop has found a way to kind of use this to guide what he uses as his intention to maneuver through each day. It's cool.
And the thing that's cool about Gary John Bishop is he's an agnostic atheist. He's not into like the universe or any of that stuff. He'll shoot you down if you bring that stuff to a coaching call with him. It's basically like you have you, and your job is to be responsible for you, which is really interesting. And it's funny that period, the period between 3 o'clock a.m. and dawn in Kundalini yoga is referred to as the Amarit veil. And it is the time when spirit speaks to us the most profoundly. It's the 2.5 hours before dawn. And when I was in Kundalini yoga training, I would wake up at 3:30 in the morning, take a cold shower, and then do an hour of yoga. And then that presence that you would get in the 45 minutes before dawn, after you had gone through this yoga practice, was profound. And that's where you get the ideas that could essentially, lead you in the direction of wherever it is you'd like to go. And if wealth is one of those places, it could be one of those places. Yogi Tea was actually the company Yogi Tea came as the result of honoring the inspirations that came to these yogis when they were doing their early morning yoga practices. They started Yogi Tea, and they started brewing tea in these barrels and selling it around Los Angeles. And now it's Yogi Tea, which is one of the most successful tea companies in the world. So this is a little bit of an aside, but one of my catchphrases is that inspiration plus integrity equals infinity. So inspiration is when the universe is speaking to you. Go do this. Go write that book. Go ask that person out on a date. Stop that stuff you're doing that you shouldn't be doing, that you're doing. And then integrity is when you align your intentions, your word, and your actions. So integrity is when you just do what you say you're going to do when you're going to do it. That's it, right? And so when you get inspired and then you see those inspirations through, that's how you become successful. So I always bring up the example of like every single band that you see become incredibly successful has practiced and practiced and practiced, utilized time, honored time, then gotten in the van and then gone and played music all over, right? For years and years and years until they become successful. So there's always a story behind someone's success, and it always comes down to how do they honor the present moment. Jerry Garcia practiced guitar for 8 to 10 hours a day. And that phenomenon of the Grateful Dead didn't just happen overnight, right? So it all comes down to how do you honor your existence, right? So inspiration plus integrity equals infinity. I think I have a document about that I can send you guys to. I'll look through my things. So anything anyone wants to share, any questions, anything anyone's not understanding? Cool. So this is a little bit of a like a shift, but people avoid the domination of making commitments around time. So people use vagueness and non-specific language and other strategies to do this. So in the early stages of coaching, the beginning of coaching relationships, in the beginning of coaching relationships, when I ask a client, by when will you do that? They'll often get confronted and defensive. So I'm working with someone and they say that they need to, have a talk with their partner or end their relationship or whatever it is, or talk to their boss about the thing that they don't want to talk to them about. And you say, okay, well, by when will you do that? And then they'll say, well, I'm not sure. I don't know. Like maybe I'll do it tomorrow, I think. I don't know. I have to sit with it first. I'm not sure. Da, 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 da. And 9 times out of 10, like what they're doing is avoiding being dominated. And I'm not in any way some shining star example of when you ask me by when I'll do something, I will rise to the occasion. So all human beings are deeply confronted and will by questions regarding time and will devise ingenious little ways to get out of it. And it's my job, like what I do is you got to hold that space. No, I asked you by when. And very often they're not sure, but often they're just avoiding that. Does that make sense? And so when you're working with people in any field, just asking the question by when can move things forward very quickly. Because if someone tells you that they'll do something by next Thursday, and then you hold them to their word, now you've got an accountability conversation, right? This is more of a conversation about integrity. I think I brought this up in the last webinar I did with Kevin, but there was this guy named Michael Jensen, and they instituted these integrity programs in the financial industry. And all they did was get people to do what they said that they were going to do when they were going to do it. All they looked at was integrity. And the bottom lines of all of the companies they worked with increased by 300 to 500% within a couple of months, just by people honoring their word. That's it. They didn't do anything else. And integrity is really fascinating because you can look at your entire life through the lens of what is out of integrity and just make a practice of cleaning up your integrity. And just that alone was very, very deeply transformational. And integrity is amazing because it's not about morality. It's just about power. So it's not a moral conversation or an ethical conversation. It's about, am I being as effective as I can in any given moment? So it's a really cool way to sort of relate to everything. So these are just some quick strategies I threw together. How are we doing on time? My phone died. Can you?
So we're 20 minutes to the hour.
Perfect. So these are just some strategies. So these are just some things that you can employ immediately. There are other things you can come up with. I'll send you over a document I created after this that's just got some fun things to ponder and considerations. So shifting your relationship to time can be confronting. It requires practice. It doesn't necessarily happen overnight. That being said, one of the sayings that we use in the transformational field is that transformation can happen in an instant. So you can get off this webinar, get in your car and drive the speed limit for a week, which is one of the recommendations, like one of the ways to shift your relationship to time, and have a completely new experience as a result of doing that. So transformation can happen like right now. That being said, transformation often requires practice. So what are some things that we can do to shift your relationship to time? So this is a good one. I think everybody was on time here, but tardiness sends a message of screw me or screw you. So when you are late for somebody for an appointment, you are sending a very clear message. Now, I was in an organization called BNI in Chicago, Business Networking International in Chicago for 5 years. And it was more or less the same group of people. And there was a woman that showed up 20 minutes late every single week. And she had the same excuse every time. It's the traffic. And I was riding my bicycle from Rogers Park, right, in the dark before dawn to get to this meeting. And I always arrived on time. And then this woman came and she showed up 20 minutes every week with the same excuse every week. And it did not occur as screw me. It occurred as I'll show up when I want. It was just the energy of it. And everybody saw it. That person did not get referrals, right? Because if that person was showing up to our thing 20 minutes late, any person that we referred to her, she was very likely to show up 20 minutes late for with an excuse, and that would have tarnished our reputation. Does that make sense? So you don't want to recommend somebody to somebody that's late, right? Because they're sending a very clear message. And when people are screw you, they typically won't apologize for being late. They'll offer an excuse or they'll offer a half-hearted apology. You could tell. When it's screw me, they'll typically show up, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I got into a fight with my boyfriend or my girlfriend. Oh, it won't happen again. And they'll be incessantly apologetic. So you can tell immediately if it's screw me or screw you. So one of the first things is just be on time everywhere, right? And obviously you can't be that always, but just, do your best. And that comes back to the integrity conversation. When something's out of integrity, all that there is to do is clean it up. So, hey, I apologize. I'll do my best to not have this happen again. So be on time is a really good one. Start being on time. Pauses are often what we need more than anything, which comes back to that conversation about presence, just being present, stopping and taking 1 or 2 or 3 minutes to just chill. You don't need to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and do the cold shower and be in the Amaret Vale or anything like that. You can take a couple of minutes. You can turn off the radio while you're driving. You can cease to do anything, right? And, you know, life-changing and world-changing ideas are often birthed in periods of relaxation. So back to the Warren Buffett example, one of the things he says is to fill plenty of your time with nothing, you know, just to have, Bill Gates says don't have any idle time, but that doesn't mean that he's necessarily doing things. So Steve Jobs, one of his big things was to take walks with people, right? So it doesn't mean that you need to be go, 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 go. So honoring existence could be sitting in the hammock, but you get the idea as the result of the relaxation, and then getting into integrity is the challenge, right? Which that's a whole other conversation about commitment and what you're doing on this planet and honoring your commitments. So how do you honor yourself in the moment? So the way to honor the source and yourself, so the way to honor God, divinity, he, she, it, whatever, is to live fully. And so by organizing our time, so by scheduling our time, we gain more access to ourselves and to the source. So in this interpretation, scheduling time is one of the highest forms of prayer. So the way that you choose ahead of time to honor moments that have not happened yet can be considered a form of prayer. Does that make sense? And Sunday evenings is a great time to get your thoughts together and plan your week. And there's just something incredibly satisfying about having a schedule and showing up and honoring what is on your schedule, and then completing what you said you would complete in the times that you've allotted for yourself. It just leads to a much more fulfilling existence. So scheduling. So this is kind of a no-brainer. People multitask. When we multitask, you know, when you're on your phone and, you know, on Instagram and Facebook, and then there's this argument you somehow get into, and then you're trying to email, and then a text comes in and another text, and, you know, all that stuff. In Zen, the Zen philosophy, Zen Buddhism, I believe the first tenet of it, or first whatever it is of Zen, is to do one thing at a time. That's it. One thing at a time, and then to do it until it's done. So wash the plate. One plate at a time. Dry the plate. Set the plate. Wash the second plate. And just consider that there's an element of slowing down to get to where we'd like to get quicker. So there's something paradoxical in that. And then this is fun, play with time. So show up 15, 30 minutes early everywhere. Relax and settle in and just notice what happens in your energy and experience. So this is when I was in the BNI network in Chicago. I would always try to arrive at the coffee shop early, and you have a chance to relax. And people often show up late. When people show up late, they're frazzled because the thing before them took too much time because they didn't manage the moment, right? So there's all kinds of things that you can do, but deal with time as an integrity item. Honor yourself as someone who keeps agreements and manages their actions and relationships to time. So be your word. Show up show up where and when you're going to show up. Right? Do the thing that you say you're going to do when you are going to do it. And that notice the impact of your power, satisfaction, and joy. And then finally, this is our last slide. So just flow state. Flow state is when time ceases to exist. So flow state happens all the time when I go into the ocean. 3 hours goes by. What happened? I have no idea. Time disappeared. It morphed into something different. It's that goes back to that Einstein example. And like, go intentionally do something. Well, the recommendation I have is play. So play is a thing that adults need, perhaps even maybe even more than children. So anything where time disappears, anything where you lose track of time, play is kind of it's fundamental to the human experience. And so discovering ways to play in your life, I personally feel it's one of the things I value more than anything else. I value, that's all surfing is. It's just high-tech play. It's a bunch of little kids. It's really just a bunch of little kids out there. The mentality, it's truly a beautiful experience. But it's one of the things I value more than anything in this existence that is not going to last forever. So that's really all I have. I just said if you would like to explore this time strategies further or anything else, you can, Kevin will shoot you a link to my Calendly in the chat, and you can email me. I offer complimentary consults. You can download the ebook from Transformation Trio, 3 Doors, 3 Keys, and that's really all I have. Is there any? Are there any questions? Any concluding thoughts? Anything anyone would like to share? I thank you all very much.
Yeah, and sorry, Dave, I was just trying to get this link sent out to everyone for your Calendly, and I'm also sending out a link to the downloadable book for Transformation Trio. But one of the things that I was going to mention, you talked about this concept of showing up early and being on time and being your word. And it's interesting that the timing of this article that came out through the BBC last night, and they were actually talking about in the Taiwanese culture, it's really important to be on time, like to the second. But it's also equally important in their work culture to not arrive any earlier than the second that you're actually due there. So it's kind of a unique culture in that they're so focused on arriving on time, and this idea of not arriving any earlier than the second that you need to be there. And they were talking about that there would actually be a queue of employees waiting to walk in, but no one will attempt to walk through the door until it's that moment that they need to be there. And the idea was that because they don't get compensated for working extra hours, but there's an expectation that the work would be completed before they left, regardless of how long it took. Their way of revolting was not to arrive a second earlier than they needed to be there. But coming back to your thought, I like the idea of being there early because it does give you an opportunity to settle in and be present, as opposed to being worried about what's going to get in my way of being present once I get there, because I may be late as a result of other factors that could feed into my transition to this place wherever I'm going. So that strikes a chord with me for sure.
Yeah, cool. And the thing about being late is it has a ripple effect. It has because you're now impacting that person's life that you're late for, and then that person's life has been impacted, and then that person goes out, and there's a ripple effect. And so it always comes down to our personal integrity, which we are never perfect at, ever. That's the beauty of it. It's just, there are just opportunities for us to plug up the leaks in our lives and things to address, and we use the distractions to avoid them. And then we end up wondering what this is all about. So thank you all so much. Thanks a ton.
Yeah, very good.
I didn't get to see your face. I can't see it.
You know, one thought that came to mind, you may have said it, but in different words, is it's a matter also of priorities. I mean, what's really important in your life, and to your point, is being on time important, or being stress-free? Because I've been late a couple of times, and it's like, oh my God, I got to get in there. What's my boss going to say? And I mean, it was good reason, but it's an excuse. But so I think priority really plays. Also, that lady that meditates at 3 a.m., that's her priority, that's whatever the most important part of my day, maybe. But she sees the benefit of that. So it's a matter of trying to, I guess, for me, sit back and try to identify what is really important, what can't slide.
Cool.
Definitely.
Yeah. Appreciate that.
Excellent. Well, I know we're just at the end of our hour here, and to thank Dave for his contribution to the Katalyst community. We were talking about not-for-profit organizations and causes he supports. And so, Dave, if you want to just chat really quickly about the cause that you definitely support and have a connection to, we are going to be making a donation in Dave's name to this organization.
Yeah, Mercy Home in Chicago. Mercy Home in Chicago is this amazing, they just do such amazing work for the youth of Chicago who find themselves more or less orphaned, and they just they're just fighting the most good fight that could be fought. So check out Mercy Home. I did fundraising.
Wonderful.
They were the easiest people to raise money for, because if people have heard of them, they will give money. So,
Is that the same as Mercy Home for Boys and Girls, or at least there used to be something called that?
yeah, that's it.
Oh, okay.
Good. Well, thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I appreciate you contributing to the presentation. And Dave, really, thanks so much for joining us again. It's great to have you here, and grateful that you can tune in from so far away and be a part of this community. And everyone else, thanks again for joining us. And unless you have any other questions, we'll let you get going. But we'll look forward to seeing you on a future webinar.
Great.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Kevin. Dave, bye.
You bet. Thanks, Jerry.